how do we help people help themselves to live better, live longer, and hopefully with a higher quality of life. Atrogi is where muscle becomes medicine. It's really about using the muscle system to overcome underlying disease factors.
Welcome to the Via Diabetes interview series. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Nice to be here.
So I understand that you joined Atrogi in November 2025. Is that correct?
That's right.
Can you give me kind of a brief overview of your career prior to that?
Right, absolutely. So I'm a chemist by training, and following a postdoc in Nottingham in the UK, I moved to Denmark in 2001 to join a biotech company called 70M Pharma, and from there I've been in biotech in Denmark for the last 25 years now. I've also spent the last 10 of those being an investor at Lundbeck Fund and Biocapital, where I was an operating partner. That let me help out a lot of different companies in obesity, cardiometabolic space, as well as rare diseases. And Atrogi came on my radar during the summer of 25, and the more I got to know the company, the more excited I was by the technology and the depth of science that they had and the quality of the team. It also resonates with what I did at 70M Pharma, because they had been also in the obesity, type 2 diabetes space for quite some time. So I had some background into what they were trying to do, and I could see the unique selling points of what they had, and I could see how I could bring something to the table.
So I understand that the company was developing a kind of treatment for type 2 diabetes initially. Can you give me a bit of background on what that was?
So essentially, all of this comes out of the work of Tora Bengtsson, a professor at Stockholm University, and his work for the last 25 years also on something called the beta-2 adrenergic receptor, and how modulating that receptor can be used to build muscle and to melt fat, if you like. Let's dumb it down to the point of saying that essentially modulating the beta-2 receptor can lead to exercise in a pill type products. Okay. Because the beta-2 adrenergic receptor once you modulate that kickstarts a whole cascade, a whole program of events that effectively look like what happens after you do weight training, for example. And that was the kickoff. And when Atrogi started in 2013, the ideal positioning of that type of approach was in type 2 diabetes, where building muscle would then improve insulin sensitivity, which is the underlying problem in type 2 diabetes. Fast forward now to 2025, obviously the market has changed because we have GLP-1s on the market. They obviously give a lot of hope for a lot of people, but it makes it difficult for a biotech company to pursue type 2 diabetes alone. But we could see a very clear way forward on the obesity with muscle sparing angle, right? It's an oral small molecule which is very convenient for patients. It doesn't cause the adverse events in the gastrointestinal tract that perhaps some of the injectable peptides do.
Okay, great. So just to clarify, it's not necessarily a competing treatment to like blockbuster drugs like Ozempic and stuff, right?
We anticipate that it can be useful for maybe the same, but also perhaps different parts of the population that are needing or wanting to lose weight, because that can improve clearly their quality of life, but also reduce comorbidities like problems with the heart, the liver, and indeed type 2 diabetes to some extent. But that all needs to be proved out. And once we've done that, then we can really see whether this is a product that goes with GLP-1s or after GLP-1s, or potentially in some circumstances instead of GLP-1s or the other peptides.
And do you have a rough timeline at all?
Well, clinical development is obviously a big beast, right? And you have 3 phases of clinical trials. We've done the first phase, the healthy volunteer stage, where we can demonstrate the safety and tolerability of the product. That's good, tick the box there. Now we need to go into phase 2 studies to show in maybe 3-month and 6-month clinical trials that we have efficacy. We actually can drop body weight, build functional muscle, and improve certain biomarker endpoints. And then beyond that, it would be phase 3 studies, which can be 1 to 2 years each per patient, of course. So we're still 5 to 10 years from the market, probably.
So still a bit of way off. Why do you think personally it's worth looking beyond traditional management mechanisms?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could look at it like this. Do you treat the symptom or do you treat the disease somehow, right? And you could say paracetamol doesn't cure what's giving you a headache, right? But it takes away the symptom. Mm-hmm. Essentially, you could then say, well, maybe giving insulin products is treating the symptom of having low insulin sensitivity by giving more insulin. What we're saying is, okay, if we go in and help build muscle and burn away some fat, in crude terms, we're developing that engine to take up the insulin, right? Because that's really where a lot of the glucose goes. It's into the muscle. So we're making sure that there is muscle and that muscle is active and functional, and that then soaks up the insulin, taking away the type 2 diabetes.
So there is a bit of a stigma attached to type 2 diabetes. Unfortunately, it's largely because there's a lack of education about what it is exactly. Is there any way that you could maybe explain the science at all of insulin production and maybe any root causes of type 2?
Type 2 diabetes, rather than type 1 diabetes, where you're not producing insulin for some reason, here you're more normally producing insulin, but your body's not reacting to it. So your muscles are not taking up the glucose that is in the blood, and that leads to a whole lot of issues that are symptomatically silent a lot of the time. Things like cardiometabolic challenges, and also I think it's called MASH now, fatty liver, etc. Probably also kidney problems and gastrointestinal tract problems. And the challenge is it's been associated with being old age diabetes. Then it was obese diabetes, but it can clearly hit people in the best part of their life, right? For many different reasons.
So another key question that we're still trying to answer, and maybe because of your background you'd be able to help us shed some light on, is why insulin and products that treat diabetes and also the technology used to manage it is still so expensive.
Well, yeah, it's a really good question, and of course part of this is really down to how much does it cost to develop a new drug. And it costs a lot of money because it takes a lot of time. And I think the latest assessment is that it costs around $2 to $4 billion to get a product to the market. I'm sure people can do that more cheaply, but type 2 diabetes is one of those areas where there's a big burden on the later stage clinical trials, because you have to show significant safety in a number of areas, as well as efficacy. That's important for the patients out there. Then, of course, a lot of the drugs are relying on fairly costly manufacturing processes, because they may be peptides or I don't know. Then you could say, well, how fair is it then that the pharma companies or whoever's selling the drugs try and recoup that plus profit? I think it's fair, and you can balance it against the benefits to society of having people who are healthier, living longer, having fewer comorbidities, right, and hopefully having less interactions with the healthcare with doctors, because they have cardiometabolic problems, kidney problems, etc., etc. Perhaps we can focus on improving how we deliver clinical trials in a way that makes it more cost effective, and thus getting things quicker to the market, even whilst maintaining or improving safety and efficacy. And the last thing I'm going to say is, this is maybe controversial, but I saw there was I think a Senate hearing with the previous CEO of Novo Nordisk, who was saying in that hearing that if he reduced the price of some of his insulins, they would then not be taken up by the insurance companies for reimbursement. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but that sounds like something that is difficult to understand. Basically, there are a lot of forces that push prices here and there, but I think we can try and improve the development process to speed things along.
So I noticed on Atrogi's website that you currently have a strong IP portfolio. I wanted to get your perspective on IP and enforcement of IP in the medicine field.
It's a double-edged sword here because you've already talked about drug pricing. And again, this fits into that in the sense that, if a company has spent $2 to $4 billion on developing a product and getting that to market, taking all of that risk, because it's 100% risk all the way to the point you start having doctors prescribe that drug.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair that they then get some exclusivity in terms of the ability to earn money from that drug, and intellectual property is one way of doing that, right? FDA, EMA will also offer some forms of data and market exclusivity for certain drugs in certain circumstances. Rules apply differently all over the place, but intellectual property is one way of saying, okay, I'm developing this particular product. But the important feedback is also that the way we file patents, the rules say we have to tell people what we're doing and how we did it. That's part of the rules of it. So we give back to society exactly how we do it. Rather than saying like Coca-Cola will keep the recipe secret, that's another way of doing it. We basically say what we've done and how we've done it, and then after the exclusivity period, after the IP has run out, then anyone can come along and make improvements or make generic versions of the drug.
Cool. Was there anything you wanted to add at all?
I'll just say that Atrogi is so much more than just obesity, type 2 diabetes. Because it's muscle, it is where muscle becomes medicine. We do also look at muscle diseases, like spinal muscular atrophy, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, sarcopenia, which is essentially age-related muscle loss. And that's really the sorts of things that drive us forward. How do we help people help themselves to live better, live longer, and hopefully with a higher quality of life?
That's a great mission. Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us.
You're very welcome.
It was a pleasure to meet you and also to hear about what your company does. It's very interesting and also a very fresh perspective, I think.
Thank you. My pleasure.